Florida State's 2025 schedule has officially been released. It was aired on the ACC network on Monday evening. We already knew a lot of these opponents, also knew some dates of what Florida State was going to be facing, but there were a few stretches in this schedule that we still had to figure out. And man, the Seminoles are going to have a challenging November here later in the 2025 season, but might be pretty favorable for the Seminoles to gain some momentum to begin this season. I'll give my thoughts on that in just a second. But Florida State's going to have 7 home games and 5 road games. There are some big games here, noting Alabama, of course, to kick off the season, which will be on August 30th. But then also, you go on the road to Clemson and to Death Valley, which you last left with a win up there on the road. And then you also are going to be facing Miami. You're going to face them at home, luckily. And then also, you're going to jump into a game on the road, going down to Gainesville, into the Swamp, against DJ Lagway, Billy Napier, and the Florida Gators to end off the season. But like I said, a pretty rough stretch of games in November that we're about to talk about. But this beginning of the season is pretty favorable, I think, for the Seminoles. Florida State going to kick off the season against the Crimson Tide and Kalen DeBoer. They have some question marks at the quarterback position. Also, Florida State going into this game, I think, to me, it favors them in the aspect of where they can keep this pretty competitive, or they have a chance of getting a win just because it is the first game of the season. I think you would rather have this early into the year rather than later in the season where the Crimson Tide can maybe figure some things out. But to me, Florida State, they can just use Thomas Castellanos in any kind of exotic way that they can go in their favor. And I expect for Gus Malzahn to do that. But that will be the debut of Florida State's 2025 squad. And man, I mean, it's going to be a whole lot different of a roster. And also, this coaching staff. Really interested to see how Gus Malzahn, Florida State's new offensive coordinator, and Tony White, Florida State's defensive coordinator, work on both sides of the ball to improve the play from what we saw last year, which was a drastic drop-off. Then going into week 2, Florida State is going to face East Texas A&M, an FCS school there on September 6th. And then Florida State has a bye week very early on in the season. I know I see a lot of the social media reactions to it. Good, bad. I don't know. I'm not a major fan of it. I think it's pretty dang early into the season. But, Florida State, to me, needs to build some kind of confidence because I think they lost a lot of that last year. I think it's pivotal to find confidence again and also to build momentum. And by building momentum and confidence, you got to put wins up there, man. And so that's what Florida State is hoping to do against East Texas A&M before they go into their bye week. And then in week 4, they are going to face Kent State, a G5 team, on September 20th. And then going into their week 5 game, it is going to be their first ACC matchup. And this is going to be Virginia at Virginia, where the Cavaliers finish their 2024 season 5-7. Seminoles hoping by then they have been able to build a lot of confidence after that 2-10 season last year. Now, jumping into October, the Seminoles facing an early rivalry matchup against the Miami Hurricanes and Mario Cristobal. Cam Ward no longer with them, but like I mentioned earlier in the video, Carson Beck is now over there with the Miami Hurricanes, coming from Georgia. There's a lot of question marks still, though, because of that recovery that he had some surgery on with his elbow. But that is always going to be a massive game. And luckily, Florida State gets that at home this upcoming season against Cristobal and the Hurricanes. And then Florida State is going to face off against Pittsburgh. They come to town on October 11th. Another nice home matchup to hopefully solidify some momentum that the Seminoles need. And then Florida State is going to travel across the country. This is going to be their farthest road game. On October 18th, Florida State's going to face Stanford, a cross-country trip over there. Shout out to any of the Seminoles and fans going over there. I'm sure that will be a scenic, beautiful view, but man, that is a far trip for Florida State there. But that is the last little stretch there before things start to churn up and the competition and the stretch of games in November gets tougher. First, yes, you're going to start off with Wake Forest and Week 10 on November 1st. It's a nice little tune-up game before the brutal part of this back half of the schedule begins, because on November 8th, the next week, and Week 11, Florida State travels to Death Valley and faces Dabo Sweeney. This is going to be the toughest conference game against the defending ACC champions. Also, too, Clemson is bringing back quarterback Cade Klubnik, and Florida State only has 2 wins against Clemson in the last 10 matchups. But Florida State went up there and won that game in 2023. I was there in attendance for that. Florida State coming away with it. Man, what a dramatic ending to the game it was, to Keon Coleman, Jordan Travis making big plays. Man, Kalen DeLoach, Braden Fisk pitching off there and giving it to Kalen to take it back to the crib. What a game that was. And, man, you just started to really get a feel for how nasty that defense was going to be for Florida State to finish off that season. And then now going from week 11 to week 12, this will be on November 15th. Florida State will face against Virginia Tech. It will be senior day for the Seminoles, and Florida State are actually going to Virginia Tech here. Excuse me. They finished the season 6-7 last season as well. So Florida State having a chance here, depending on how you went there with the Clemson game, and a lot of these too, and then these last couple of games of November could, show your fate and the potential ACC championship appearance up there in Charlotte. So these are going to be some very important games. Win or lose, you got to make sure you respond, because you will have 2 more ACC games. Like I just said here, Virginia Tech is one of those. And then up next, you go on the road to NC State. Every FSU fan knows how that goes, the history behind it. Some brutal, brutal games, some heartbreak, some nightmare games, some nasty flashbacks for FSU fans. But the Seminoles will go up there and face the Wolfpack on November 21st. Actually, FSU has lost 5 of its last 7 games at Carter Finley Stadium. A nasty kind of disease there that Florida State runs into sometimes when facing the Wolfpack on the road. And you can just already expect for that one to be an evening game per usual. It always seems to be that way. And then to finish off the season, it doesn't get any easier. This is the end of the regular season for the Seminoles, but they are going to face Billy Napier and DJ Lagway on November 29th for their biggest rivalry game of the season. The Gators finished 8-5, led by QB DJ Lagway this last season. Florida State actually won on the road in the Swamp in 2023 with their backup quarterback, Tate Rodemaker. Florida State going into these games, a lot of big rivalry games, some teams, we thought Miami might have had a chance there to make a run to enter the college football playoff, even get to the ACC championship. That did not happen. They have some question marks there. It just does definitely seem like the Florida Gators and Billy Napier are garnering and gaining some momentum there going into this next season after finishing off a rough stretch in a good way and coming away with some wins against some ranked teams. But, man, Florida State needs to find some wins to garner momentum. That's the biggest thing to me, is garnering some momentum and building confidence, because I think it was completely shot this last year. I wouldn't blame them. But you see how competitive you can get against Alabama. Then you go on a stretch there of getting some wins against East Texas A&M, Kent State. You're looking at going to Virginia, who wasn't a great team last year. I think you have a favorable matchup too for Florida State against Miami. And then you got Pittsburgh, Stanford. Then you got your bye week before going to Wake Forest and going through that stretch there of Clemson, Virginia Tech, NC State, and at Florida. So let me know down in the comments what you think about this schedule for Florida State. Which games do you like the most? Do you like some of these matchups that Florida State's going to be facing with some of the bye weeks? You just let me know down below. Hit the like button, and also, too, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We would definitely appreciate it. Also, too, hit that bell as well. It notifies you every time I release a new video. So until next time, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.